by and large, you're talking about imperialism. And I don't see that in church world service.
I can see you. I can see me. I'll be the eyes so that I just can be.
This is another episode of a special series called Enough for All of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. This series sheds light on 75 years of an NGO called CWS. My name is Maurice Bloem and I welcome you to another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen, but actually this is an episode of a special series called Enough for All, a series where we talk about an NGO, a faith-based organization called Church World Service, or CWS. I'm delighted with today's guest, who has been on the board of CWS for a number of years and involved with a lot of work of CWS as well. As always, I will ask her to introduce herself. Eunice, please go ahead.
Thank you, Maurice. Nice to talk with you again. My name is Eunice Kamaara. I'm a professor of ethics in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Moore University. I am 58 years old.
Young.
Yep.
and you live in Kenya, right?
Yes, I live in Eldoret, Kenya.
Great. Eunice, as I said, I'm really delighted to be able to speak with you again, but now specifically about how you got involved with Church World Service, etc. Can you tell? Do you still remember the first time that you heard about the organization?
Yes, the first time I heard about Church World Service was actually from then Leader Robbins. Now she's Leader Husman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd visited Indiana University, and I went to give a talk at Indiana University in South Bend. And my host at South Bend was a psychologist who happened to be a friend of Linda. So when the psychologist invited me to her house, I found Linda there. And Linda is the one who spoke to me first about Church World Service. I was excited about an ecumenical movement that is all over the world, particularly because of my work. I was still then working with Moore University as a lecturer, and I was interested in the work of the church in development. So I was like, oh, okay, so we have a big ecumenical movement that is serving people to end hunger and poverty. And I thought, wow, that's good. I was excited because I like to hear that the church is doing development work. And before that, I was working, not before, at that point, actually, I was still working kind of consulting for the World Council of Churches, which is another big ecumenical movement. And I'd been very impressed at the work that the Church World Service was able to do because of its size, its ecumenical nature. Yes.
And do you remember in which year you gave that, presentation or lecture in South Bend, which is in Indiana and the Midwest in the US?
Yes, I'm thinking it was 2002 or 2003. Yes.
Okay, so you have been you've heard about CWS for quite a number of years.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you saying in terms of that you were impressed by the size of this ecumenical work. Can you be more specific what you really like about the work of CWS?
Well, first there's impact in numbers. If you're a big organization, you're more likely to achieve things that you'd not achieve on your own. Because then when you have many networks or many churches or many denominations coming together for a common goal, the chances of achieving that goal is higher than when you're doing it on your own. And what impressed me most about Church World Service is that it was a service in the sense that it was working with the most vulnerable populations in the world and addressing the very important or the most basic needs of human, which relate to hunger. I was more impressed particularly about the attempts by the Church World Service to address root issues, root causes of poverty, root causes of hunger, and in resettlement work to give people some ground on which they can stand on their own. I thought that was quite impressive. So the work of resettling immigrants in the US was giving individuals opportunity to find opportunities in America. So I thought that was quite impressive. And it was also impressive in the sense that it was giving hope, making people who are hopeless feel like there is hope tomorrow. And I remember when I talked to leader Usman first about Church World Service, she spoke extensively to me about Church World Service work with the young people through the Giving Hope methodology. And we were specifically talking about Eastern Africa, working with the young people who are HIV orphans, either total orphans or they had lost one parent. And at the same time, they were poor. So they were poor and they were victims, or there were persons who had been adversely affected by HIV. And Church World Service was giving them hope, like this is not the end of the world. Life can go on. And I thought their work with orphans, especially who are heads of households, was quite impressive. So that's what I liked most at the point when I heard about it, when I heard about Church World Service.
Yeah. And I know you later got involved.
Yes.
Can you tell a bit about how you got involved? And, because in different times of your life and career, you did different things for or together with CWS.
Yes. So initially, I got interested in Church World Service because I was interested in linking some young people who I was working with the Church World Service. So through Caro Thuo, I'm sure you remember Caro Thuo, who has moved on to another organization. Through Caro Thuo, the young people I was working with in Eldoret were able to get some exposure, particularly on this Giving Hope methodology. So that was the very first thing that we did with Caro after she was introduced to me by Lida. And then Lida and Caro got me involved in some research project assessing the Giving Hope methodology. So we went across Kenya and talked with young people who are within the Church World Service Giving Hope program. And it was impressive to hear them speak about the work of Church World Service in their lives. And this project had so much impact in my life because I got to make friends with a number of young people. And one of the young people who left an impression in my life was a young girl I met in Chirangani. Chirangani is like 2 hours from where I am, from Eldoret. And she was, she just impressed me. I was just, we just clicked and became good friends. And we've been friends since. although unfortunately she passed on about a year ago. She
Mm.
had what is it called? She had a problem. She had leukemia. Is it called leukemia? Blood
Leukemia,
cancer?
leukemia, yeah.
Yes, leukemia. Yes, she had leukemia.
Oh,
So
so sad.
I still remember her, and she was such a good friend of mine.
Mm.
So I still remember a lot of things that came out of that project that I did with Church on Service. And then after that project, that's when I got in the board. Leader suggested to me that she thought I could be of use in the board of directors of Church on Service. And leader was so passionate about Church on Service. I didn't have a choice but to
Mm.
agree and say, yes, I'm happy to work with the board. And I'm glad I did.
Mm.
It was a great experience.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I know CWS is was glad to have you. If you look back at thanks for sharing, the time around giving
Mm-hmm.
hope, and what is clear is that I think
Mm-hmm.
the methodology and how CWS approached its work
Yeah.
really clicked with what you stand for and how you work yourself. If you you also were part of the board. If you look back at your period on the board, what are you most proud of? That happened during the time that you were there.
Mm, well, like I said, one of the things that one of the programs I like with Church World Service is the one of resettling immigrants.
Hmm.
And the thing that stands in my mind happened just the other day when what's his name, the former President Trump, when Trump was locking out immigrants. And I remember the Church World Service coming in strongly and opposing that and pushing, advocating until the policy was kind of the national policy by Trump was kind of watered down. That that stuck in my mind because I was like, wow, this is amazing that Church for Service is able to push even Trump into doing something like this. So that stuck in my mind.
Hmm. Great,
Um,
great.
I don't know. I don't know why I think so much about immigrants because I think my experience abroad, particularly in the US, has been like I wouldn't want to live in the US. I would want to go back home. Every time I go there, I stay and I want to go back home. I miss home. So when I see people coming to the US and uh, they are being denied entry, I'm like, really, these people don't really want to come to the US. They're not just coming to the US because it's fun.
Mm.
Definitely, they are in trouble. So when
Mhm.
I see when I learn about and I'm involved in the work of Church World Service, with regard to resettlement of immigrants, if I feel this is great work.
Mm.
Yeah. So the fact that Church World Service was able to push back some of Trump's policy
Mhm.
was amazing for me. It left an impression in my mind.
When CWS celebrated its 50th birthday or
Mm-hmm.
anniversary, it made a
Yes.
book called Help and Hope, 50 Years of Help and Hope. Last
Yes.
year, in 2021, it celebrated 75 years
Mm-hmm.
anniversary. It did not produce a book, although, with um, short experience by the former president and CEO John McCullough
Mm-hmm.
is to be expected, and I hope that in the notes of the podcast I will be able to put a link there so that people can download what he has written
Mm-hmm.
about his
Mm-hmm.
perspective about 75
Yeah.
years. But if we would write a book and you would be asked to come up with a title for
Mm-hmm.
75 years of CWS, what would you what would some of the keywords in that title be from your perspective?
There would definitely be faithful service. 75 years is a long time, so there is quite some bit of faithfulness on the part of church world service, and the concept of giving hope be very strong. Yes, so I would probably call the book Faithful Service, Giving Hope.
If you look at the evolution or the development or the growth of CWS, of Church World Service, many say, okay, it started as a US Christian charity, and then slowly, it went into more ecumenical, and now it is a global interfaith organization. Yeah, would you say yes, I agree, or would you say no, I don't agree because, or yeah, on the one hand I can see, it's more global, but the other hand it's still a US organization. So what is your observation around that, about the development of CWS over time?
I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that much of the there's a lot of work of church world service going on around the world. It's not just things happening in the US. There's a lot happening outside US, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. So in a sense, I would agree, yes, it's moved from being US to being ecumenical and even to being interfaith. In my experience, I would say yes, it's not so much Christian now. I didn't quite get the impression that it is Christian, except in the word church. It is more of, I would say, a faith-based. It's faith-based, all right? It's based on faith, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily come out as Christian faith. So yes, I would say probably it's interfaith, but it is not interfaith in the sense that it doesn't quite bring all the faiths that you'd find in America, for example, across the world. There may be quite a bit around Christianity, around the Jewish tradition, but I'm not sure I've had experience of Muslims in the board or even in the staff. Most of the staff I would gather Christian rather than interfaith. So, but in terms of the people that church service serves, well, it would be interfaith, because it doesn't isolate like we are going to help Muslims or we're going to help Christians. I mean, it's help to whoever is in need of help. But I would take issue with the movement to use of the term global.
Why?
I would be thinking interfaith would be a better description than global, because global sounds fashionable. It sounds like moving with the flow, moving with the world, and the way the world has been moving is not so much global. When you say global, global health, for example, you say global politics, or you say global economics. By and large, you're talking about imperialism. And I don't see that in church world service. So I'm like, probably the word global doesn't quite
resonate with you. Mm.
resonate with you. But it's probably because I have a biased, maybe it's not biased, but my view of the term global and globalization and the process the term represents is that things are coming from Europe, from the global north to the global south.
Mm.
And the global north is, kind of dictating and pushing the global south into a certain direction.
Mm.
And I'm like, we need to be more sensitive to the needs of the global south and the contexts and the experiences and the situations. And here I'm thinking about things that people in the global, and by the global north and the global south, I'm not necessarily talking geographically. Even within Kenya, we have the global north and the global south, where the global north is the rich and the powerful, and the global south are the people that church world service serves. So what I see is what I think every time I see the word global and globalization, I feel we are being condensed into a village for purposes of control, that the global north can then take charge and control how we do things. And I can give an illustration, particularly in the context of COVID. COVID came starting out there, starting in the global north. But when it got to the global south, the global north was quick to say, this is what you need to do. And this is what was floated as international best practices, including the very basic protocols of wash hands, use sanitizer, stay indoors, isolate, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, while we agree that these are good practices, they're not global. In Africa or in Kenya, for that matter, I can tell you that the people who isolated, the people who washed hands, the people who use sanitizers are in the global north. They are the rich in those big estates. And I can say probably the kind of estate I live in, because I'm able to wash hands. I can afford to buy sanitizers. I can afford to stay indoors and work from the house. But the big majority, the huge majority of Kenyan people cannot afford to wash hands every now and then. They cannot afford sanitizer. They cannot afford to isolate. They are living in a one-roomed house as a family of 10. So how do you isolate when you're in a 5 meters by 5 meters house and you're 10 of you? So I'm like, why are we calling them international best practices? They're not practical. I mean, you can't practice them here. They may be best practices, perhaps, and I'm not saying they are not important, they are not necessary, but I'm saying it's important to look at context. So my quarrel with the word global is that I find it hypocritical. It's like saying we are together, but we are not together. Like the way humanitarian organizations, they kept saying we are in this together, we are in this together, but practically there's nothing like a globe.
Yes, if I ask you to name one colleague, a partner, or a supporter of CWS, who
Mm-hmm.
best embodies of what CWS is about from your point of view? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which person would you name and why?
First, I would name Maurice Bloem.
No, you cannot name me.
Okay, then I don't know who to name. I'll name somebody after that. But let me explain why I think Maurice is one of the greatest supporters of church for service. Your 100-mile, um, what do you call it? Campaign? Walk. Yeah, your 100-mile walk is the greatest service I have seen anybody give to anything. And I remember you asking me a question sometimes back. If I was to do 100-mile walk, what would I do it for? Who would I do it for? I don't know what I said then, but I suspect I said I would do it for my mother. I don't think I'll do it for anybody else, for anything else. So when you do it persistently every year, I'm just impressed. I'm like, this is amazing. It's amazing that somebody can give their time, their energy, their their life, because it's not like you're giving money. I know you raise funds in the process, but what you yourself give is not money or material things. You give yourself, you give your life. So that for me embodies what service is in general and what church world service is about. If you say I don't name you, then I'll name Linda Husman, again, because I know her. I may not know the people at the staff or the supporters of church world service. So I'm naming who I know. And the second person would be Linda Husman, because she's very, very passionate about church world service. Even now in her retirement, she keeps talking about church world service. She keeps uh, saying this and that about church world service. When she's disappointed, she'll be telling me I'm disappointed. When she's happy, she'll say I'm happy. And she's glad this is happening. And so I wouldn't have joined church world service were it not for Linda. I was clear that I had done some bit at the global level with the World Council of Churches, but Linda kept pushing and pushing, and her passion and support for church world service was something. Yep.
Okay. No, yeah. Thank you for mentioning Linda. I hope that I approached her. I hope she will ultimately say yes to being part of this podcast as well, because she yeah, I agree, she did a lot, and actually still is doing a lot for CWS. So yeah, thank you for mentioning her name. um yeah, for me, Linda, and as well as you, are synonym for not asking the question to the people we work with and collaborate, what do you need, but what do you have? And I yeah, I really like that. That's the asset-based approach, right? And yeah, if you talk about, working together, co-creation, dignity,
Yep.
that is the essence of what Linda always tries to do, and when she works.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I would also ask you to share an anecdote or an experience that best describes your time with CWS, a memory. You've mentioned a couple.
One of the experiences I treasure again was a visit
Hmm.
we made to, I can't remember exactly where, but it was Center for Immigrants.
Hmm. It was during a board meeting when we visited one of our
Yes,
partners, a
exactly.
refugee resettlement center
Yes,
agency.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And um, it's something I remember so clearly because, like I said, I was like, poor people. I felt like if I was in their shoes, I would be completely hopeless.
Mm.
Because, like I said, my experience is that I love home, and I'm quite a social person. I want to be around people I feel socially secure around, you
Mm.
know. I want to be with my relatives. I made fun. I said if I was to relocate to the US, I would move with my mother, I would move with my family, husband and children, I would move with my house girl, I would move with my neighbor. So I looked at them and I felt what it means to be dislocated socially and physically. And I remember looking at one lady who had a small child there, and I was thinking, this lady did the so many hours flight from Nairobi. Most of them from Africa would be coming through Nairobi. So first you have to do the flight from Nairobi to Amsterdam or to the UK or wherever, to Asia, about 8 hours. And then you do another 8 hours from Europe to America. And I'm like, what were they thinking? Even as everything was going on, my mind was focusing on what that woman must have experienced. And she must have wondered, where is this we are going that we are not arriving? And we are going by air. And I imagined how destabilizing that must have been for her. And then I was thinking of how it must be um, amazing for her, not amazing, comforting for her that some organization would be waiting for her and receive her and try to make her life livable, you know, in one word, give her hope. Because by the time she arrived in the US, I'm sure she had no hope. That flight, I can tell you, Maurice, is too long. Nobody ever makes those journeys back here at home, even by road. To make an 8-hour road journey, there must be a big issue. It's not just a road travel, it's by air. So she must have been thinking, I'm going to the end of the world. I mean, so to find a place that should be at least be taken care of would be, like giving hope. I don't know how else to put it. It would give her hope. So that experience left me feeling how important church world service is. And in my mind, I was saying, well done, church world service. Thank you.
We talked about, CWS has been growing, evolving, developing over time.
Mhm,
And yeah, you also have been part of this discussion as a board member.
mhm,
CWS is also looking at, you know, do we need to, how is it in terms of the brand CWS? Because,
mhm,
you know, we are still a membership organization, but,
mhm,
you know, our supporters, um, yeah, are 60 plus, and we know
mhm,
that if we have to continue, we need to attract a younger generation as well. So we are thinking
mhm.
about, should we have a name change? You know, do we need to talk in a different way? Yeah, how do you see, what is your reaction when you hear that? We have had discussions about changing the name from Church World Service. Well, initially only talking about CWS, but then maybe another name even, because CWS, what does that mean? And that also has to do with that many of the younger generation have a bad, uh, not necessarily a positive reaction when they hear the word church. Um, so yeah, can you a little bit reflect on that CWS might change or is considering it, changing the name, or yeah, what is your opinion about that?
Mm, I don't know about, or I don't have an impression that younger generations would not be keen to have the word church,
Hmm.
at least not from Africa.
Hmm.
Because some of the best movements in this country, in my country, Kenya, are actually around churches and they are led by young people. One of the most dynamic churches in Kenya, actually in Nairobi, operating in the city of Nairobi, is called Mavuno. It's a church. It's called Mavuno Church, and
Hmm.
it is largely led by young people. And this is one of the churches that did enormous work responding to COVID crisis, particularly in terms of going to informal settlements and providing families with food, and therefore enable them to stay at home. And I was like, we have such dynamic young people, and it's amazing that they are faith-based. They are Christians, and they want to identify as Christian. So it may be that out there, young people don't want to identify with church, but here there's quite a huge population that identifies with the church. What has happened is that the church has changed its face so that it is culturally dynamic, and with the church becoming culturally dynamic, it remains attractive to young people. Like that Mavuno church, they have like how do I describe? They have very youth culture in that Mavuno church. For example, there is a lot of modern dancing, this boom, boom, boom music with a lot of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the characteristics of those churches that attract young people. And then there's not so much obsession with how are you dressed, because in traditional churches in Kenya, there'll be a lot of, you can't go to church in trousers. It doesn't matter how decent the trousers are, and that kind of thing. But those churches which are attracting young people have capitalized on a dynamic youth culture to keep young people, even in terms of language. So I'm thinking the name would not be a big deal. What would be a big deal is the way things are done. Are they being done in a modern kind of way? Are we using IT, for example, because young people want to use a lot of IT? So I think the name is not so much of an issue as the way things are done and how that attracts young people and younger generations.
Okay.
So what I would say is maybe having more youthful members in the board would help, because then they would give ideas on how to make church world service youthful.
You know from our previous podcast that I like music, so I always have a music question.
Mm-hmm,
If I ask you to come up with a song or a piece of music
mm-hmm,
that represents CWS,
mm-hmm.
what song would that be?
Mm, two songs,
Okay.
and there are two because the first one I don't know if where you'd find it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a song we sang in nursery school or in Sunday school when I was very young, a small girl. And I don't know it in English, I know it in my mother tongue, but basically it talks about uh, building stone by stone. So the song says, all the time we are building one stone after the other, one stone after the other. Anytime we win by supporting somebody in need, we put a new stone on top. So that song tells me of the work of church world service, which piece by piece, it builds hope across the globe or across the world. A huge constitution, but church world service is not overwhelmed, because it does it one at a time. So that's one of the songs. And the
Can
other
you
song,
sorry to interrupt you. Can you give
mhm,
a little glimpse of the melody, because it's a nursery song, right?
yes, it's we would sing and let me see whether we would sing and do like this. So we say, hingo ciothe twakaga kahinda o kahinda, hekarũ ĩrĩa ĩtonekaga, no rĩrĩa twahotana nĩ mahiga magwaka, hekarũ ya tene na tene. So we'd be like building
Yeah.
and going up, and then including everybody. So this tells me of world, building the world bit by bit. So that's why it reminds me of church world service.
Great. And when you were talking about stepping stones, I remember that in the HIV/AIDS prevention work, it was often used as well and referred to, right?
Yes.
Correct.
There's even a manual called Stepping Stones.
Stepping Stones, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second song?
And the second song is by Bill and Gloria Gaither. It's called Will There Be Any Stars on My Crown? So when I imagine it's about getting to heaven and then getting crowned because of the work you have done. And the work one has done will not be in material form, it will be in form of other people. How many other people will you present or will present themselves as people you touched along the way? So those people are the crowns, are the stars on your crown. So I keep thinking church world service touches quite a number of people. When church world service gets to heaven, there'll be stars. There'll be living gems. Actually, the song talks about living gems. It talks about presenting, will there be any stars in my crown? When we present living gems, will we get crowns? How many crowns? Or how many stars will there be on my crowns? Yeah. So I keep thinking church or service is just accumulating those stars in its work. And I keep thinking every time Maurice walks 100 miles, stars just jump into his crown. Walking with you for just one day, I was left feeling I wouldn't do this. I don't know why I would do this.
So for the listeners, Eunice did accompany me, and I have to think in one of my of the days.
It was in Michigan.
In Michigan, yes. And I think we walked 20 plus miles together, right?
Yes, we did a whole day. We finished at 6, by which time I was crawling, literally.
I great memories to the day. That was wonderful. Eunice, I have one more question for you, and last year we in 2021 we celebrated our 75th anniversary. That was also a time, and actually it's still a time of reflection, looking back and what can we do better. And a big topic for us, and rightly so, is what was our role of CWS in fighting injustice, and especially racial injustice. And could we have done better? And what should we be doing now on the basis of those lessons, but also on the basis of the situation in the world today? So can you maybe give some reflections on that?
Well, my response is I respond the way I do because of what I do. And as a researcher, I'm always keen to think about community participatory research that works very closely with local communities. informing how to respond to situations in local contexts. So I'm thinking Church World Service is doing a great job, but it could do more if it put more attention into working with local communities and letting the local communities guide more in terms of what can we do and how do we do it. And it applies in this case, even local communities would refer to young people. If you're interested in engaging young people, then you'd want to engage the young people to tell you how to engage them. Then that would be more effective. I don't know whether I'm making sense.
No, I understand what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last thing you would like to share around the topic that we discussed today, CWS? Although I hope that even for listeners who are not familiar with the work of CWS, they've learned something today around the work that needs to be done and how you can do it. How as an organization you can continue to learn as people part of an organization. You need to do the same as well. I'm very much closely monitoring now also what's happening around the inner development goals, for example. You know, 17 sustainable development goals were identified. The progress is slow. One of the reasons folks say is that we as individuals as well as people, uh, we need to do a better job in ensuring that we reach those goals, and therefore you need to develop capacity, capabilities. You need to grow yourself as well. So five goals were identified that they call the inner development goals. So yeah, any message from you or question?
I think I would like to say my experience of Church World Service is that it does a great job reducing the negative impacts of hunger, of poverty, of specific settings, kind of giving people hope in otherwise hopeless situations, like situations where there have been floods and people have been displaced, people have been dislocated, Church World Service has been doing a good job. And I would say if I was younger and if I was richer, I would give much more of myself to Church World Service. And I would encourage people to read more, get to know more about what Church World Service is doing, and see what they can do towards putting some stars on their crowns. And finally, I would like to say that Church World Service has an opportunity. Faith-based organizations actually have an opportunity, a great opportunity today, because the world is increasingly recognizing the importance of values and actually declaring that these are at the center of development, as long as you're talking about human development, because people are moved by emotions. Human beings are moved by emotions. And there's much more to life than just material things. And very often the material things are driven. People give because of certain values. So if we are able to promote those values, then the giving will happen, the sharing will happen, the protection of the environment will happen. Otherwise, we can talk about climate change. We can talk about a huge gap between the rich and the poor. We can talk about being in this together and fighting it together. But as long as we don't have human values, which is the software of human development, we will develop things that are not sustainable. We will develop around material things, and material things can collapse anytime. So I would say if church world service would pay more attention to issues of values and see how spirituality, where spirituality refers to relationships, how building relationships can lead to more sustainable development. I think that would be exciting. That would be exciting for faith-based organization, because faith-based organizations are grounded on faith, which is not tangible. It's also a value. It is something we can't put our hands on, and yet it moves so much. It is so powerful. So I guess this is opportunity for faith-based organization to bring out the best in believing in values. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eunice. Always a pleasure and delight to talk with you, to listen to you. Yeah, thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you for this opportunity. I wish you the best as you continue to do what you do best, particularly for church world service. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sama-sama.
Okay, sawa.
Do you see you? Do you see me? Will you be the eyes so that we all can be?
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you want to know more about Church World Service, please go to cwsglobal.org.